Now, just a little warning before we begin, there will be major spoilers in this video for the 12th and final episode of Season 1 of Andor, so if you have not seen it yet and you don't want anything ruined, it is a really good time to click away. Okay, so what an absolutely incredible episode to wrap up an amazing first season of this show. A show that was virtually flawless in every major or important way, such as writing, acting, cinematography, score, special effects, and just pure enjoyment factor. As I keep saying, this is one of the best shows I have ever seen, period. I am kind of saddened that it seems many fans are skipping out on this one for any number of reasons, when I think it's been the best thing we've gotten out of Disney Star Wars thus far, though yes, things like The Mandalorian and The Siege of Mandalore have also been excellent, though in different ways. Which is, I think, one of the reasons why I have enjoyed Andor so much. It's been a sort of different take or approach to Star Wars, a more grounded one, or for a lack of a better way of putting it, a more real take on the franchise. And it seems that way, especially in the wake of a couple of shows that went really all in or very heavy on the more surface level spectacle stuff and came off feeling more like bloated movies, like a shallow story scraped over too many episodes, rather than an actual series that realized it had the time to slow down a bit and incorporate. I mean, the best way I can think to put it is that after 6 or 7 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett or the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, even setting aside how much I either liked or didn't like them, I was left feeling like, okay, this is done and over with. I don't need any more of this. While after 12 episodes of Andor, twice as many episodes or twice as much runtime, I feel like we're only just beginning and I cannot wait for more. But before we can think of doing any type of speculation for Season 2, let's talk about how Season 1 just wrapped up and begin that discussion with the opening logo and this week's version of the theme song. Which has been a really cool idea, I think, that each week or with each episode the opening theme changes a little bit and lets you kind of guess what that's going to mean for the upcoming episode. And this week, to me at least, it sounded like a marching band coming right for you, which made me at first think it's just alluding to the fact that everything up to this moment or every episode has just been building up to this larger sort of crescendo that was incoming, which yeah, was sort of the case. But it also alluded to the actual march and musical instruments we would see in the episode, instruments that very much resembled and sounded like those we would see in the real world that a marching band might use, which I thought was cool and fitting because it kind of harkens back to what the original trilogy did with the guns and blasters, how it took real guns from the real world and just kind of added little bits and pieces to them to make them look a little more space-like, you could say. But anyway, the episode actually opens with us seeing Salman Pak's son, and he's the guy who was captured and tortured and killed by the Empire in an earlier episode. We see him building what I think we all pretty much assumed right away was going to end up being a bomb, which it was, which is yet another example of how the Empire is basically creating their own worst enemies, or how taking everything away from some leads them to have nothing left to lose and thus every reason to fight. You could even say that is the theme or best way to sum up this whole first season. I mean, we watched Cassian go from someone rather selfish at the start who didn't really care about the Empire or what they were doing, just as long as they didn't get in his way, to steal a line from Jyn in Rogue One, they're not a problem if you don't look up. But he goes from that to, by the end of the season, after having everything he cares about either shattered, destroyed, or taken away by the Empire, to now being someone not only willing to fight, but willing to give it all for the cause because it's all he has left and all that matters to him anymore. What he says to Luthen at the very end of the episode, not to get too far ahead of myself, to either kill me or take me in, were some of the best, most chilling and powerful words ever uttered in this franchise, because we finally, on the very personal and intimate level you could say, we finally totally and completely feel and understand exactly why the rebellion not only formed, but why it would eventually win. And it tied in beautifully and perfectly with the part of Nemik's manifesto that we, and of course Cassian, listened to in the episode, about how freedom is such a pure and intrinsical idea that any attempt to stifle it will inevitably lead to rebellion, that armies will naturally rise up and fight tyranny, and every little victory, even tiny little ones, will all amount to something. It'll push you one step closer to their inevitable breaking point. And just like virtually everything else in the series thus far, it is so perfectly written and so very true at the same time. It's inspiring to us, and it's emotional just to listen to it, and the score and the visuals that go along with it, knowing that Nemec, even just writing it in the first place, and now Cassian listening to it, it's all part of this movement, this eventual victory of the rebellion. That Cassian will bring about such a breaking point by stealing the plans to the Death Star so that it can be destroyed. It's all so poetic. Again, this show is some of the best writing I have ever seen anywhere. But I digress, and getting back to Salmon's son for a moment and what he's building and preparing to do, well, he very much feels like he's going to be this wild card element of the episode, which is really saying something considering even without him there's this palpable tension that puts you on the edge of your seat from just knowing all these characters are kind of coming together and could potentially collide in who knows what type of ways. And so it feels like this bomb he's making is going to be anything from a big, giant, complicated wrench into whatever plan Cassian or the others come up with or whatever they're going to do, to being a catalyst for something bigger and likely very tragic for the people of Ferrix, some sort of big reaction by the Empire, or perhaps, and most likely, it'll be a little bit of both. Either way, we do see that Cassian does, as expected by, well, pretty much everybody in the audience and in the show itself, he does come back to Ferrix for the funeral of his adoptive mother, Marva. We also see him stop at, I guess you could almost call it the grave site of Clem, his adoptive father, or where his own brick has been placed into a wall, which is, I think, a really cool sort of concept or part of their culture, that the important people of the community, those who were the foundation of it in life, are also sort of the foundation of it in death. But anyway, we get this rather interesting flashback where Clem is telling a young Cassian about how basically some things are overlooked and discarded despite still having value if you just brush away the rust. That something new and shiny is not automatically better. And this is, of course, a sort of metaphor for what the Empire is and how they operate. They are the rust, as Marva even says later in her pretty epic speech. They are what covers something up and makes it look like it has no value, or like old ways have no value compared to their new ways. It's also about how they can't see past outer appearances, past that rust, and they underestimate or undervalue or potentially underestimate the danger of what is underneath, which will be a vital component to the eventual victory of the rebellion, that they will take advantage of everything and anything they can to win. They will, in some cases, literally use the forgotten junk of the galaxy to beat the new shiny empire. After this, then, Cassian learns that Bix has been taken prisoner and is being held in the hotel, which is the base of operations now for the Empire. And as I kind of predicted, Cassian's plan will then sort of become using the funeral or the ceremony as a distraction to rescue her. And I don't know that it was specifically planned this way, though I don't know that it wasn't. I'm not sure the episode makes it clear one way or the other. It could have just been the townsfolk doing their own thing in defiance. But they start the funeral early by a couple hours and with more people than they were allowed to have by the Empire. And this does cause quite the distraction for Cassian to take advantage of. And he's then able to use the tunnels, which were mentioned in an earlier episode, to get into the hotel and to get to Bix. Though he also has one of his own townspeople, one of the townsfolk who he owed money to in that first episode, trying to turn him over to the Empire, most likely to gain a few credits. But before getting too deep into all that, let's backtrack just a bit and check in on some of the other plot threads that aren't directly connected to what's happening on Ferrix, including learning that, yes, Krieger was, if you will, hung out to dry, and he walked right into the trap set by the Empire, a trap that Saw and Luthen could have warned him about, but didn't because it might cost them their spy at the ISB. Which also, as Luthen hoped it would, it's apparently wiped the bad taste from the mouth of the Emperor after Aldhani. It's made the Empire on the whole feel good about themselves again and will make them perhaps loosen their grip just a bit and let the rebels operate more freely. And I just love that Lonnie, who is the spy and warned Luthen, gets to be there in the room discussing it and knowing he tried to stop it. Also, away from Ferrix, we have this really great scene with Mon Mothma and her husband Perrin, where she's kind of hanging him out to dry too by accusing him or claiming she's heard from someone that he has been gambling, which is apparently an issue he's had a problem with before. But of course, Mon hasn't really heard this. She's using it to help cover some of the missing money. She's using Perrin to cover her rebel activity. And it all comes off sounding very legit to the driver who's listening in, because Perrin's not denying he'd ever do such a thing. or that it's happened before. He's denying that it's happening again, as any husband with a gambling problem likely would. And all this gets brought back to Blevins at ISB headquarters, who is now going down the wrong line of thinking when it comes to the missing money or odd transactions with Mon Mothma's accounts. It's actually quite brilliant, yet kind of sad on Mon's part what she's doing here. There's then only one more scene involving all of this, which comes close to the bitter end, where we see that, yes, Mon has apparently taken Davos' deal and is introducing her daughter to his son. Like Cassian, she has made her choice and is selling out her family. Not that he's selling out her family, but she is now all in for the cause. Because you could say she is giving up or selling out both her husband and daughter for the cause. And the look on her face says she likely, down deep, is utterly disgusted with herself, but knows it's what she has to do. Though judging from their expressions, it looks like her daughter is just fine, if not excited about all this, while Perrin doesn't seem to care much either way. And so now back to Ferrix, where we see that Luthen and Vel are discussing what to do about Andor, and Luthen figures he's going to get himself captured by the Empire and then taken back to the hotel, which is the best time to kill him. Let the Empire do the hard work, and they can just shoot him when he gets there. We also know that Cinta is still on Ferrix and has been watching Marva's house the whole time, and a bit earlier we get another scene between Cinta and Vel that shows just how important the cause is to Cinta. It seems to be pretty much the only thing that matters, and how important Cinta is to Vel, that she seems to be the only thing that matters to her, more or less. And I honestly thought, and wrongly predicted, one of the two would die in this episode, a sort of tragic love story you could say, with Cinta the most likely to be killed, which would then sort of turn Vel into Cinta, someone who is so for the cause after losing someone that everything else comes secondary, like is happening or has happened to pretty much all the other characters and to keep with the whole theme of the episode, but perhaps another character going down that same path would have been redundant. Instead, as far as we know, they both make it out alive, which was maybe the most surprising part of the episode for me, that there weren't more sort of main characters killed off. Not a complaint, mind you, just a bit surprised is all. Really thought one of the, again, more main characters would die in this one, but considering how great all the characters have been, I am by no means disappointed to see them all probably returning for Season 2. Anyway, during the Vel and Luthen discussion about what to do with Andor, the Anvil guy starts to do his thing, and the ceremony / funeral for Marva kicks off early, sending the Empire into a bit of a panic. And speaking of Anvil guy, I really enjoyed his "this is Sparta" moment, or "this is Ferrix" moment, when he kicked the stormtrooper off the tower. This guy needs an action figure with leg kicking action, and I hope you're listening, Hasbro. But seriously, the ceremony starts early, and it does thanks in large part to what Marva's hologram will eventually say. It becomes sort of the perfect distraction for Cassian to walk right in and save Bix. And I know there were some people who put the theory out there that maybe Marva would actually still be alive because they felt she needed to have a big rebellion moment. And though I didn't think this show would, shall we say, do something quite that cliche, faking a death kind of thing. Not to mention I could go a little while in Star Wars with a character just being dead or presumed dead and staying dead. Anyway, I did agree she kind of needed or deserved a moment. And she certainly still got it here with her speech, even though she was, of course, still dead. And I absolutely loved how it sort of mirrored or was the same yet the opposite of what Luthen said in his speech a few episodes back, that they both obviously are for the cause and want things to change. They hate the Empire, but Luthen is more just for the cause, and she, Marva, is more for just the people. Which is, again, somehow the same thing yet different fight, or way to look at the fight, I suppose you could say. Because where Luthen is sort of fighting a personal war for the greater good, yes, he still talks about the satisfaction he'll never get from his hopeful eventual victory. But Marva, on the other hand, is talking about how she wished she could have woken up sooner or done something sooner. She doesn't want to shine or be remembered, as she says. She just wants the people of Ferrix to rise up and endure and fight. She is certainly much more selfless and Jedi-like than Luthen could ever hope to be, I think, because he is, after all, there for the speech, and I believe he begins to realize that the rebellion didn't start with his announcement on Aldhani. It didn't start with the nameless, faceless rebels stealing millions of credits from the Empire in the shadows, but rather with one woman in a town square rallying her people to wake up and take action for themselves and their very home and way of life. I really think at multiple different points, Luthen is questioning a lot of things, questioning his ways and what really motivates him, or what will motivate the people, perhaps. Either way, I love the dilemma this puts the Empire in as she spews what to them is propaganda against them, not to mention is straight up calling for action. And if they stop it, it's no doubt going to cause a problem, yet if they don't stop it, it's going to cause a problem. And on a side note, the acting here, the emotions shown on the faces of all the people at the ceremony, especially the kid who is no doubt being inspired by Marva's words to chuck that bomb he made, it's just phenomenal. It really sells the scene. You not only feel Marva's speech, the inspiration through her actual words, but through their emotions and reactions as well. And the music in this scene and the whole episode fits oh so well. It further conveys the emotions, the swelling of hope, and yet that underlying fear of actually fighting and risking it all. As I've said before, the score in this series is not the grand, epic, and sweeping work of John Williams that we've all come to know and love. It is something you probably aren't going to listen to at random at home like you might some John Williams, but it always seems to encapsulate and enhance the moment and scene perfectly. But anyway, after the Imperial captain finally decides he has to stop this and he knocks over B2, who is showing the hologram of Marva, a brawl does start, with Marva's brick in the hands of Brasso being one of the first shots fired, you could say. Though that said, at first there are no actual shots fired by the Empire, to their credit, I guess. They do try to quell the uprising without blaster fire, but after the bomb is indeed thrown, that changes everything, and stormtroopers do seem to do quite well aiming and taking out plenty of civilians. There are no problems with their aim in this series. But again, no real major characters, I'd say, die in this fight, which is what it is. Though for a moment, and just a moment, it did look like Dedra was going to be beaten and killed by the townsfolk. She kind of gets caught up or swept away and lost her Death Trooper escort, until she's of course saved by Cyril. And I love that he tells her his name yet again, as if he believes she would have completely forgotten him. He's absolutely obsessed and fascinated by her, and thinks she won't remember his name. Either way, I do think this is the moment where Cyril has finally earned himself a place in the Empire. We see that Cinta has killed the Imperial who was keeping tabs on Marva for Dedra, maybe creating a sort of job opening for him. Maybe he'll become Dedra's man on the ground, if you will. One way or the other, I do wonder just how far the show will go with these two. I've kind of joked before that I'm shipping them or want to see them get together. And so I can't help but wonder what becomes of both of these characters in the end. As I've said before, Cyril is not your classic bad guy. He is an antagonist, sure, but he's not a bad guy. But now, again, it's very likely he will join the Empire and have the chance to go all in. Or maybe at some point he realizes it's not what he really wants, and he will try to convince Dedra to leave with him, to run away together. Like I said, who knows what they're going to do with these two characters, but clearly they are putting them together for some type of purpose, and who knows where they will take it. In the end, some of the heroes of the episode make their escape to a ship and then get off-world, like Bix, Brasso, and B2, but Cassian stays behind after having spotted Luthen at the ceremony and realizing he had come there to kill him. Cassian then manages to get back to Luthen's ship before him, which is maybe a little weird, but he does that and he waits for him on board, which brings us back to that scene or moment I talked about at the beginning, where he simply tells Luthen to either kill me or take me in, basically meaning the transformation of Cassian Andor is complete and he is now ready to do anything for the cause. He is the rebel operative we will see in Rogue One, and we will again, of course, see in Season 2. This is then followed up by a post-credit scene where we see that what they were making on Narkina 5, the parts they were all making in the prison, that they were, of course, part of the Death Star, a part of the giant dish, essentially, meaning the guy who had a hand in building the Death Star, albeit unwillingly and unknowingly, he will eventually have a hand in destroying it as well. It's like poetry. It rhymes. And so in closing here, and to wrap this up quickly, I could probably ramble on and on about this show and this episode. But anyway, what more could you ask for out of a season finale than this? It hit on all the right notes emotionally, it had plenty of action, it looked and sounded fantastic, and it felt like the conclusion of one thing, yet also the start of something more that you cannot wait to see. This was, without question, in my opinion, and no matter how long this franchise may or may not yet endure, this was one of the absolute best things Star Wars we will ever see. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of this episode, or point to what I missed talking about, because I feel like there are some things I may have skimmed over or left out, mainly for the sake of keeping this a somewhat reasonable length. Either way, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.